Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well. And this is part 3 of the War Studies 101. Really important area of war to cover and understand as a historian and as someone who's trying to be non-objective and trying to look at what's going on and help others understand war as a theoretical subject. Now, firstly, I start with the disclaimer that I always start with. This is about the study of war. This is not a comment politically. I'm not being politically active, and I'm trying to be objective. Now, this area is one where there is no objectivity. And this is part 3A. I'll do part 3B after a short break. So part 3A, we're looking at the role of propaganda, the media as an escalator. So the media as a driver of conflict, the media and propaganda as a means of making war grow towards Clausewitzian total war. So I'll give that disclaimer. Start of all videos I do, I will disable comments. Unfortunately, there are people in this world who are not subjective. They just purely want to flag wave for one side or the other. That to me as a historian is not what a historian does. You are more than welcome to your opinions, but I will be disabling comments because I don't want hate speech on my channel. For everyone that's waving a flag for one side, there is somebody else waving a flag for another side. And what happens is the internet quickly turns into a slanging match. This is about war in the historical perspective. I'm commenting on my personal opinion, non-professional opinion, as a historian, someone that's been through historical training. And that is very important to bear in mind when you look at war, because the majority of the media are not historically trained. So let's crack on. So let's have a look at war. Well, what is war? Well, war is a continuation of politics by other means. The objective of war is to disarm your enemy, to compel them to do your will. Ultimately, when you boil it down, war is normal people doing murder. The difference is in war, they are doing murder and sometimes mass murder, and they are doing it legally. You can't go out on the street and stab someone. You can when you are part of an army fighting another army in a war with a just cause, adhering to the laws of war. You can go and bayonet your opponent. So the media plays and has played a very important part in history of getting people that are farmers, that work in factories, that read books, that enjoy eating food, to go through horrendous deprivations such as having no food, having no books to read, being sat in a trench, getting shelled, and then going over the top to confront an enemy that they have never met. What's the one thing that remains the same in war? Well, the one thing that remains the same in war from the start of history to now is war is about people killing people. It's a nasty and horrible subject. So how do you get normal people to give up their everyday safe lives and go and fight a war? Well, in history, the media has always existed, and you go back to ancient Greek period, you go back to the biblical period, you go back to the Torah, you go back to Islamic writings, you go back through Chinese writings, you go through the Japanese Shogun period, you go through all of this history, and what you find is that actually there is an element of manipulation and control. So if you are a king and you want to raise an army, well, in the medieval period, you would use your barons, and your priests would spread the word for your side that the other side is wrong. God has made a judgment via the Pope, and it's time to go and fight that war. You have a push towards total war. And you have a push towards total war, and this goes right back to Greek or Roman times. In Greek times, you had what was called demagoguery. So someone stands up and gives an oration. They are clapped, they are applauded, and everyone's fired up and goes off to war. In the late medieval period and going through the Revolutionary War period into the age of newspapers, you have pamphlets. So you have religious pamphlets mainly, or you have ideas being spread by pamphlets. Sometimes the state controls these pamphlets and says, no, they're revolutionary, censor them, find out who's printing them and put them in jail. The growth of the printer as a form of recording written thought and putting it in paper and mass producing it is crucial to the expansion of war and how it goes to become total war. And then you are into the age of newspapers. So in the 19th and 18th century, you have the growth of the newspaper. You have writers like Winston Churchill at the start of the 20th century covering war. You have everyone's getting their newspaper delivered to their house. It's telling them what's going on. It's telling them what to believe and who is right and who is wrong. So the newspaper and mass media grows. And now we are in the age of social media. So now we're in an age where you don't even have to have a newspaper. You don't even have to have someone giving a speech. President Zelensky or Putin can go on social media and make a tweet. That tweet goes round and round the world. People pick up on it, and it may not necessarily be true, but people believe it, and it goes everywhere. And what you have is you have a push towards total war. We are in an age where I draw parallels as a historian. I draw parallels between the run-up to World War One and where we are now. And in World War One, you have probably the second total war. And I say that the second total war because the first total war was, of course, the American Civil War. At that time, you have an arms race. You have dreadnought building. You have a monarchy in Britain, which has German blood in it, Prince Albert. And then suddenly it all turns into hatred and you have total war. You have what's called the Powell's battalions. Soldiers from Sheffield, from Birmingham, from Cradley, from down the road near me in Dudley, wherever it may be, and they are signing up to go to war. The Powells. The war will be over by Christmas. So despite the fact that the British monarchy has, and this is historically correct, German blood in it, the Kaiser, who was a great friend of the British monarchy and the Royal Navy, becomes enemy number one. We must defeat the Kaiser. The Kaiser is evil. The Kaiser is out to take over Europe. Now, whether that's right or wrong is not for me to say. I'm speaking as a historian. This is what happened historically. In the next series, we'll look at how the media can de-escalate war and stop war and the growth of the anti-war movement. But today we're looking at the role of the media in fueling war. So let's keep World War One as a helpful case study. And let's look at some propaganda from World War One because it's important to understand what happened so we can understand the present. That's the job of the historian, and that's why I'm doing this video. So at the start of World War One, we have a complete change where the Kaiser becomes the enemy, the German people become the enemy. Various terms which are deemed racially unacceptable, hate crime, hate speech becomes acceptable. Women of Britain say go. So here we go, a poster from the time. We've got the women of Britain and the little kid, and they're watching Daddy, their brother, going off to war. Now, at this time, the war was mainly male. The women would be working in the factories, ultimately. A massive change in gender politics, massive societal change going. But what the people who wanted to escalate the war wanted to convey through posters like this was, it is your duty as a man in Britain to go to war, to fight the Kaiser, to fight for your country. And the women in Britain are saying go. Now you have feathers. People that couldn't go to war were given feathers as a sign of cowardice. They were shunned socially. You had people who were conscientious objectors being jailed. But the idea was that through posters and through newspapers and through shaming, would be that you could recruit people who were reluctant to go and kill other people. It's not really a nice thing to do, and you could shame them into going to war. So here we are, a very famous poster. This is used just for educational purposes. Women of Britain say go. And then this one, even a dog enlists. Why not you? Well, the dog really doesn't have any choice, does he? I mean, let's face it. Do you want to go to war? Woof! Do you want to go to war? Woof! Do you not want to go to war? Woof! Would you like to go to war? Woof! Okay, fine. The dog's given consent to enlist. Again, look at the propaganda that's going on here. And again, I'll use this for educational purposes. A dog cannot make a conscientious choice whether it is or isn't on the side of the Germans or the side of the World War I British. But even a dog enlists, so why not you? So again, more shaming. You know, if the dogs are going out there, then you shouldn't be sat in the pub drinking your beer. Then another propaganda poster, and this is used for educational purposes again. The Empire needs men, all answer the call. Helped by the young lions, the old defies his foe, enlist now. It looks very much like Lion King, actually. And then we have the growth of the U-boat campaign. Britain is facing starvation. It's facing starvation because the World War I Germans had U-boats and they were very effective at cutting off our supplies. We were also blockading Germany using the Royal Navy and our submarines. So here we go. The war is escalating towards total war. The U-boats are out there sinking ships. The convoy system is introduced. Early steps in anti-submarine warfare, but ultimately the freedom of the seas. And then again, we've got various terms which would be considered racist now. And again, we've got a real discrimination and dehumanization of the enemy. U-boat captain, the seas was all free now. You can go wherever you please. Look at this. The U-boat is out there sinking ships. Those dastardly U-boat crews sinking our ships. How dare they? We've got a spiral here towards total war. We've got something which is really worth noting. It's called dehumanization of the enemy. How do you get people to kill other people that they would normally be friends with? You have to dehumanize them. So the media and propaganda plays this role in dehumanizing the enemy. We're not fighting normal people, we're fighting animals. Where have you heard that before? Then we've got what can essentially be called the propagandization of war crimes. So in order to get more support for the war to keep going, and in order to get more money to fund the war, because Britain was on its knees, America at this period was isolationist. Isolationist means that America was interested in America, Trump, America first, okay, but on a larger scale. So you have what's called war crime propaganda. The Lusitania was sunk by a U-boat under very debatable cause. Were they right to do so or were they wrong? Well, it's not for me to say, but it became used as propaganda. Again, I'm using this for educational purposes. I don't own the rights to this. So this is just purely for education. So here we can see how a attack on a civilian ship, which may or may not have been thought to have carrying weapons, which may or may not have been sailing when it was told that it was unsafe to do so, it gets sunk, and we have lots of people drowning in the sea, like the Titanic, which would have been fresh in people's minds at this period. Irishmen avenged the Lusitania, joined the Irish Regiment today. And then we have this push for America to get involved in the war. So America up to this period is not involved in the war. The majority of Americans are focused on America. Isolationism is the one of the big driving forces in American politics. America is a huge place. It doesn't need to be involved in war. Why should it? Because it was under the rule of colonial Britain and it sought independence. So why go back to supporting that system, people in America said at the time in World War I. I'm speaking as a historian. So we have Wake Up America, Civilization Calls, every man, woman and child get involved in the war. Everyone. We have nurse Edith Cavell, very famous nurse in Britain. Again, I use this for educational free use under the relevant copyright terms. Edith Cavell was a nurse said to have been murdered by the German army. Again, fact versus fiction. I don't want to say what actually happened. I'm not an expert in that field. All I will say as someone who studied war is you then have these stories coming out. Boys, remember, Nurse Cavell killed. Here we have a German soldier with his helmet with the spike on, holding a gun. There, he's killed the nurse. We have justice, the figure of justice here. Justice demands that look, they've killed this nurse. You need to go to war to avenge her. So in World War I, you have this massive spiral of hate. And what it leads to is it leads to the dehumanization of the other. Okay. Now, wherever you get the term the other, you know that you're onto something bad. They do this. They think like that. They behave like this. Look at them, the other. Now, some of what happens when it goes into World War II becomes even worse. Things that quite frankly would be racist. So I'm not going to display them because quite frankly, they don't have any place in a modern society. But as a historian, we need to understand them. We need to understand this concept of dehumanization, of making the enemy the other. And what that does is that drives total war. So you start to have phrases. You don't refer to people by their names. You don't refer to the Japanese as Japanese. You don't refer to the Germans as Germans. You don't refer to the Russians as Russians. And this is a sickening process. And the reason it's sickening is because what's happening here is you're having a growth in hatred. The media is spreading hatred in this period. And this is, of course, taken to another extreme after World War II. We have the domino theory. Everyone is a commie. If you're a Soviet, your goal is to overtake the entire world and spread communism. There's certainly an element where there is an ideological bias within communism to spreading it. But in reality, what you have is you have regional war like the war in Vietnam, which through the domino theory, through the American presence, through the Gulf of Tonkin incident, it spirals into a huge war, which leads to the death of 58,000 Americans. So the media plays its part in escalating war. Now, I want you to think, and I want you to think really hard about what you and we are told. As a historian, a good historian will question what's going on. I'm in no way seeking to undermine the media. The media is good. It tells us what the news is. It tells us what the weather is. But we must question what we are told. And nowhere can we see this more. And bringing it back to modelling, this is a MiG-29 SMT, which I built from Zvezda. Zvezda, of course, Star, is a Russian company. Should I be buying a Russian product? Well, debatable. Many of you will say, no, you mustn't. Modelling, to me, is not about propaganda. It's not about war. Why would I build an RAF Bomber Command Halifax? Well, I'm a historian. Why would I build this in my Marmation scheme? And why do I build What If? I build What If to stay away from politics. I like planes. I like the means of war. I don't necessarily want to go and kill people, however. So we're in an age of propaganda, of mass propaganda. And what I find amazing is for everyone that says the Germans were wrong, Germans were terrible in World War II, and they were the Nazi regime was ideologically committed to the genocide of the Jewish people. But what do you have in the model world? We have panzers. Oh, look, I've got the latest Panzer with Zimmerit. The engine deck is too big. It wasn't the right tank that Michael Whitman had. Let's not kid ourselves, guys. The Panzers were not spreading peace and love in World War II. Nor was RAF Bomber Command. So let's not kid ourselves that actually even within the modelling environment, and that's why I do my channel ultimately, we have politicisation and propaganda. So here is ICM's The Ghost of Kyiv kit box. So here we have the MiG-29 of the Ukrainian Air Force. The kit is made in Ukraine, proudly displaying that. No problems with that. But who was the Ghost of Kyiv? Well, the Ghost of Kyiv didn't exist. How do we know that? We know that by work of RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute. We know that now because various media outlets have finally admitted that the Ghost of Kyiv was not real. Big news to some people. The Ghost of Kyiv didn't exist. He didn't shoot down 5,000 Russian aircraft. What actually happened, if you read the RUSI paper, is Russia shot down most of its own aircraft. So I would encourage you to go and read the RUSI paper, where you'll find that communication problems, problems with interrogation friend and foe systems, trigger-happy air defence and electronic jamming meant that the Russians shot down most of their aircraft themselves. They didn't need any help. But why do we have kits like the Ghost of Kyiv kit? Well, we have it because the spirit of self-defense of Ukraine is important, and I'm not taking away from that. So what we have is we have myths and legends, and we have the propagation of propaganda to maintain the fighting spirit and to maintain the right of self-defense for countries like Ukraine. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to go and buy the ICM kit. Well, actually, I'm not going to go and buy the ICM kit, but I'm not going to go and buy the ICM kit as a political statement. The reason I'm not going to go and buy the ICM kit is actually, to me, the ICM kit isn't the best MiG-29 kit out there. I find that the Zvezda kit is actually more accurate, and I won't be buying the Trumpeter MiG-29 kit either. And the reason I won't be buying the Trumpeter MiG-29 kit is because of the intakes. Okay, so if you want to go and buy the ICM, the Ghost of Kyiv kit, go ahead. You are supporting the Ukrainian industry. That's a good thing. You're helping people to have a life, to have food and to put food on their table, and what can be wrong about that? It is a very cool camouflage scheme, and it is a good story. Okay, so certainly nothing wrong with the ICM kit, but to me the Zvezda kit is more accurate, so I make my decision based on accuracy. And you can see that in the fact that the way that the Zvezda kit, this is the SMT model, the way that it builds, the way that it fits together, it is actually a much more modern kit than the ICM kit, which I think is a more dated set of mouldings and not as accurate. Likewise, I won't be buying the Trumpeter kit, not because it's made in China, but because its intake shape is wrong. And that's where, if you want to go and buy the latest Panther ULFS G with the night vision system that was never actually used, go ahead, crack on. You can debate for hours whether the Zimmer is in the right place or not. I hope that's helped, and I hope that helps you understand the role of war and the role of the media in supporting an escalating conflict. One thing that really does annoy me is I can't get this missile to stick on. I don't know why, but I can't get it to stick on. So I'll go and fix that. Thankfully, the Zvezda kit is also pretty robust and survivable. But if you do have any tips for getting an R-27 missile to stay on, let me know. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Goodbye.